Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is looking at those people who were born when Uranus was in Scorpio. And the years of this are 1975 to 1981. Obviously, in 1975 and in 1981, these were times when Uranus changed signs. So you're going to have to actually find out exactly uh, if you qualify or not. I can't find the exact date when it started and ended. I just know the years here. I guess I could dig for that further, but some of you will already know this and therefore be attracted to this video for that fact, so it won't be necessary. But you can always look it up online. So this is going to be the tail end, or you could say the last third of Generation X. And so this the oldest period people from this period of time are, at the time of this recording, which is 2022 in September, they are how old? Like about maybe 46 or 47, I guess it would be. And the younger ones would be like turning either 40 or 41, something like that. Okay. So this isn't really a generational planet, Uranus, because a generation obviously has to be when reproduction occurs. So that's why Pluto is a 15 year and Neptune 15 years. That's the age when people can typically reproduce. So this is going to be like half of that. And it still is an outer planet and it still encompasses a number of years. So 7 years is quite a big chunk of time for a group of people to all have the same planet in the same sign. Okay, so it is going to tie you in with people from these years. And I just want to go over what this can be for you, but also about what the events were going on at that time that may have affected things for the collective, because I really believe that informs this generation. Because well, some of you who, let's say you're born in 1980, whatever transpired in 1975 or 76 is not going to be something that you remember because it was before you were born, but you still are dealing with the aftermath of that. So, for instance, the Vietnam War ended in, I don't know if it was like 1974. So, even in 1975, we were still getting over this traumatic event, which had been part of the country's collective history for the past 10 years at least. Or when did it begin? I think it was 64, maybe 64 actually. Yeah, it was 64, Gulf of Tonkin. And, when you think about it, we had a lot of trauma. Those of us in the United States, I wasn't alive then, so I'm saying we, but I meant the collective, starting from when JFK was assassinated in November of 1963, and then here we are at war, starting in August of 1964. But even before that, even when Kennedy was president, there were still, you know, quote unquote advisors going to Vietnam, and there was the Cold War stuff going on. So that wasn't very, comfy cozy either. But it was a very turbulent decade, the 60s, and the 70s was kind of the aftermath, and then we had Watergate. So by the mid 70s, there was a lot. I'm saying this based on things that I've read. I've watched documentaries about um, these events, and there was a lot of cynicism, but that cynicism is created by disappointment and that sense of being let down by something that has occurred. So, Scorpio is a sign that deals with what lies beneath the surface, and Uranus is the collective. According to the information that I have online here, they're really talking about Uranus in terms of rebellion and in terms of being progressive, in other words, being forward moving, not clinging to tradition. So that is true, but I'm also looking at what the 11th house represents, and that represents the collective. And Uranus is connected with having intuitive gifts. And so I feel like one of that is tuning into the collective. And with Scorpio, it is the seedy underbelly of the collective. So an event like Watergate, for instance, or even JFK's assassination, even if you were not alive when these events occurred, you still came in the aftermath of that. And, Ronald Reagan there was an assassination attempt on his life in, I believe it was March of 1981. I remember being a freshman in high school. I think somebody came in and mentioned that he had been shot. And I was not, my family were not supporters of his, but, he was the president at the time and he had just gotten elected. So that was newsworthy, obviously. And so there was a lot going on beneath the surface during those years, even in the aftermath of what was going on. And the first thing that I thought about when I thought about what was happening in the United States specifically, but of course this is true for around the world, and I was thinking about pop culture, was that disco became a big thing. Because I thought immediately of 1975, and I thought, okay, what was big then for the collective? And it was disco. Now, the reason I'm saying this is because the early 70s was quite different in terms of that vibe in popular music. It was a lot more contemplative, quiet. Yes, there was, novelty type of music and, bubblegum songs, but there was a lot of, folk, singer songwriter type of things. Folk, not really, but I mean, um, more thoughtful types of music. And then we had this kind of music that was much more flashy and seemingly superficial. And the reason that I bring that up is that I think that that was almost like a trauma response to what had happened before and trying to kind of party and lighten up and things like that, instead of having to deal with all of the sorrow and the disillusionment that occurred, because of course the generation that came before this one were visionaries in terms of their utopia that they were hoping to create, and there was a lot of disappointment that went along with that, a lot of disillusionment. And so the children of this generation had to, it's kind of like rising from the ashes of that failed experiment, but nothing is ever a failure. So I think of this little group as the forerunners of the truther movement, in the sense that they, Scorpio is the sign that we would associate with conspiracy theories. But I think of Uranus as well. And the truth tellers, also Uranus and Sagittarius, will definitely be that when I get into that. Uranus represents technology, and this has been a major red pill for the collective, the internet, in terms of providing alternative information. And so one of the, because I looked at this one site and I don't even know how to say it. It was like I.thehoroscope.co. I don't know what that's supposed to, how it's pronounced. But anyway, they talk about Uranus. Wait a minute, they said something here that I wanted to mention, but they didn't mention, I didn't see anything specifically. Okay, the statement verbatim was, they are good at uncovering the mysteries lying all around us using unconventional methods. But they didn't say exactly how. And I would say that the internet is the way that they're doing it. And it's not that, I mean, the internet is just the newest form of dissemination of information. I mean, the television, the radio are also still with us, and they are past forms before we had the internet. But I don't think that that is the most significant part of it. I think what is significant about technology is that it allows us to say what we want to say without the filter of some authority figure that's trying to shape an agenda. So that can be one way that it is kind of unconventional, I suppose. Another thing that I think, and I didn't see anything about sex. A lot of people talk about Scorpio and sex, and I'm glad, I don't think that that is as commonplace, that stereotype or cliche, because whenever I do a video about the eighth house that Scorpio rules, or any kind of placements in Scorpio, and I mention sex, I get people telling me that they have been celibate for a long time. And these are very, kind of personal placements in Scorpio or the eighth house or connection with Pluto. And I really resonate with that. I think that people that have these placements take sex seriously. So they're less likely to be frivolous concerning this issue. They may be very, very, place a lot of importance on it, but that's what makes them take it seriously. But with Uranus, this is like, if Uranus is in the eighth house, I think there can be a similar thing. And according to the information that I have obtained, Uranus in the eighth house can be somebody who is unconventional sexually. Like they're either they have fetishes, or they, they are like kinky sex. I guess that's a fetish, but I would also say, because it can be the collective, anything that involves more than one person. And it's really interesting because I was sitting at a table, in a cafe, and I overheard these people who were younger than I am. I don't really know how old they were. And, truth be told, they might not even be of this generation. They might be younger. But it just brought that up for me, that they were saying, oh, yeah, and we had a threesome. And they were just saying it matter of factly, just like another day at the office, or, nothing to see here. And I was trying to see how I felt about that, because on the one hand, you know, it's the taboos, which the eighth house are about embracing taboos, actually. It's nice to see that people feel more open about things that are, would be totally scandalous in a prior age. But in another sense, because when I couldn't really hear everything that they were saying, But it sounded like there were complications because of this experience. And I was thinking how I would feel about that. And, it just didn't seem like something that, I would find appealing, or that it just seems like it would make life more complicated. Now, that's just coming from my perspective, but I gathered from how they were characterizing it is that there was some kind of complication that arose. Um, because, if you have friends and then you become sexual with them, it kind of changes the nature of the relationship, even if you're very open minded. So, this combination, maybe this is the first generation that has been very experimental with sex, but has it really given them what they want? Because Scorpio's connected to intimacy, and I think in this kind of a dumbed down society culture that we live in, or fast food culture, where people just want instant everything, that they think that they can get there through sex, that can be their ticket to intimacy, and it's possibly a trap that this generation, or half generation, has demi generation, is that right, has had to face, is that it might complicate their life more than liberate them, because Uranus is about freedom, freedom of self-expression, freedom of having to conform to the norms of society. Scorpio is a complicated sign, and I would not never characterize Scorpio as traditional per se, but it is a water sign, and I do think that politically you may find a lot of Scorpios are conservative overall. I could be wrong about that, but I do think that there is that element in Scorpio which tends to be quite self reliant. Like in the United States, we have this party called the Libertarian Party, which is like really, um, you have to fend for yourself kind of thing, rather than rely on the government or blah, blah, blah. And Scorpios is a pretty extreme type of sign, and I could see it's very much about personal transformation. And I also think that Scorpio does not like dependency, and yet it can have its own quirky contradictions, because Scorpio is also has that tendency as a fixed sign to want stability in its everyday life, and um, just as a water sign, I just think that it likes security, and um, so that kind of just rugged individualist mentality may not float Scorpio's boat. So yeah, it's a very interesting thing. Oh, I just thought of something, because I went to this site called astrologyk.com, because I really wanted to get a finger on the pulse of the actual generational influences. The other sites that I looked at, they were just like talking about these kind of scorpionic traits that, combine with Uranus. But this is not a personal planet. So talking about certain personality traits to me is not really appropriate. Ultimately, we want to talk about how these years of people, how they tend to act in general. And they one thing they said, I'll just quote it verbatim: a simple friendship may suddenly become passionate without either party knowing why. It may also go the other way: a passionate affair may suddenly cool. Now, immediately I thought of friends with benefits. I think that that is something that may have originated. I mean, I see this with younger people though too, so it's possible that there are other. They may have paved the way this generation um, for that type of connection. And this is another example of how this may be very difficult to actually sustain because Scorpio is a very passionate sign. And so, intimacy, what people often find, and I've dealt with this with clients, is that when they try to have these casual sexual relationships, it doesn't really sustain itself long term because at least one party gets emotionally involved. And I think this can happen with both genders. I think women traditionally have been more prone to this, but I actually know of a case that has nothing to do with my one of my clients that where it was the man who got caught up in it, even though the woman made it very clear from the onset that it was going to be friends with benefits. And this individual happens to be born in this, probably has Uranus and Scorpio based on how old I know that they are. So I think that people have to really look at what they're doing. And with Uranus, they may like trick themselves or fool themselves into thinking that they are oh so progressive. And then when it comes down to it, they find out just how jealous they are or possessive. And I think, oh, another thing that goes along with this is polyamory. And again, I have seen this with younger people that this has transpired. So I would have to see other influences that perhaps that may not be Uranus, but another generational planet that is influencing people this way. Um, and I see similar types of things, and I think of polyamory as very Uranian, where it's more like the collective, like why do we fall in love with one person that is so backwards, limited consciousness, um, and also why do we just have to have sexual expression with one person? That is old fashioned. That is tired and played out. And but the thing is the idea of being open about it. And so maybe it is like Uranus and Sagittarius. I don't know. I'll have to see the exact influences for that group of people to see if that's applicable to them. But the term open marriage is something that preceded polyamory, from what I understand, because I've been interested in these concepts for years, just the idea of them. And usually in that case, it was more about being open and ethical about wanting to experience sexual relationships outside of the primary relationship. But with polyamory, I understand that it's also the emotional side of things. I'm sure that it can be just sexual if that's what somebody wants, but it can also involve loving more than one person in a very meaningful way, um, involved way, and maybe even sometimes living, in a group setting. So all of these things, this would be very difficult with Scorpio, though. So Uranus, I can kind of look at it like this. Uranus wants to be the innovator, and with Scorpio, it may be with sexual relationships, but it may not be an experiment that actually works out, because a person may find that either they or their partner are resistant to it ultimately, that they can't get over their intensity, that they have a tendency to be quite possessive or jealous or what have you. And some of that can be fear of abandonment, but there's like a very contradictory thing with these two um, elements coming together. Uranus is so much into the collective, and Scorpio's into merging with one person, the intimacy with one person. Also, another thing that I feel that is connected to this is the idea of being the healer. Now, I think of Scorpio in that regard because the eighth house is a house of transformation, and the healer is into transformation. Uranus can be energy work, so the Reiki master. So this may be the first generation. When I say first, I'm talking about the people that are alive at this moment that really embraced energy healing in a big way. This era is from 1975 to 1981, and I would say having, my exposure to New Age concepts. I'm not part of this generation, but I'm just saying, like, my awareness of it was that it really came full force in the mid 80s. So the oldest people that were born in 1975 would have had exposure for sure going into the 90s with New Age concepts. So even crystals, to me, I did not encounter much about crystals in those years. And I'm sure they were around and people were involved with them, but my first level of spiritual awakening when I was 19 years old, it occurred in the mid 80s. And that was just not something that came into my awareness. But yeah, all of that kind of thing I could see would be very appealing to this generation. And maybe is the first one to really do it much more as a group. Of course, people like Shirley Maclaine, who I don't know what year she was born, probably early 30s, I'm thinking. Um, she was very much into this. She wrote a book that I really credit as my catalyst of my spiritual awakening called Out on a Limb in the early 80s. Yeah, so the early 80s. Okay. Well, that makes sense because when Shirley MacLaine's book came out, it was a smash hit. And those concepts were becoming widely publicized, maybe widely ridiculed too. So definitely this generation was steeped in the New Age concepts, but being the healer, I feel, could be a big one too. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. I hope that this resonated. If you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.